Bitcoin is giving you a second chance. Will you take it? For many of us at the end of 2024, early 2025, we figured at this point in Bitcoin's adoption, you would not have the opportunity of buying Bitcoin for less than $100,000. The nature of Bitcoin adoption was such that we figured it was probably just going to leave people behind, and people like you would be stuck buying Bitcoin above $100,000 for the rest of eternity. Well, Bitcoin is giving you a second chance to buy Bitcoin below $100,000. And I want to unpack some of the reasons that Bitcoin has given you this second chance so you don't think something's wrong with Bitcoin. Obviously, nothing's ever wrong with Bitcoin. The price is never suppressed in Bitcoin because there's something wrong with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is always running just fine. It's transferring billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars every day on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's working exactly as intended. All of that's fine. So nothing's wrong with Bitcoin. But let's talk about why Bitcoin's price is where it is and why this gives you a second chance at adopting at lower prices. First of all, for most of 2025, the price was, at least the prices people remember, were 105,000, 112,000, 118, the peak of 126. For most people at any time in there, if I had gone to them and I had said, hey, I'll give you a chance of buying Bitcoin at $86,000 right now. If I sell you my Bitcoin at $86,000, most people would have said, wow, if I could just rewind time, if somebody would just sell me $86,000 Bitcoin, that's so amazing. Then I wouldn't feel like I got left behind. I wouldn't feel like I missed the train. I wouldn't feel like I was late to the party. Wow, if I could just buy $86,000 Bitcoin. But I can't because it's 105 or 112 or 116,000 or 118,000 or 122,000 or 126,000. So people felt like they missed the train, got left behind, late to the party and all of that. Well, here it is with Bitcoin giving you the opportunity to accumulate Bitcoin at $86,000 per coin. So let's walk through why that is. First of all, the adoption of any asset, no matter how revolutionary, is not a straight line. If it was a straight line, everybody would speculate that the future was coming faster than it actually was, and that would result in a volatile way up. So this is, even if you look at the most transformative stocks on the stock market, the Magnificent Seven, Apple, Amazon, Tesla, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Google, and Facebook. I named them all seven. Anyway, you can Google Magnificent Seven or ask ChatGPT. Those are the 7 highest performing stocks in the last decade in the stock market. Even if you look at all of them, each of which transformed their market. They transformed the market for electric cars, social media, online search, AI. Let's see who else is in there. Software with Microsoft, e-commerce with Amazon, and whatever the other of the 7 companies is. They obviously transformed their market as well. Otherwise, they would not be a multi-trillion-dollar company. So each of those companies transformed their markets. But if you go back and look at them, each of them had a very up and down stock price through that time because nobody was sure if that company was going to win the market and nobody was sure how big the market was. So the same is true in Bitcoin. It is not a uniform adoption. In fact, anyone who thought that a radical transformation of the entire monetary system would be a nice, smooth line. No, that's never happens. It never is a nice, smooth line when you're going through a radical change in the way people do business. Look at AI right now. AI is not a smooth line. I mean, AI is a massive transformation in the world right now, but it's not a smooth line. I mean, even the stock of NVIDIA has been all over the place. So Bitcoin is volatile because it goes up and down as people speculate how quickly we are going to make the transition to a Bitcoin future as compared to how long we are going to remain on the old US dollar and fiat currency system. But also 2025, which has had less than stellar results for most people, depending on when you bought Bitcoin in 2025, there were also some significant headwinds that Bitcoin had. And James Check, my favorite Bitcoin analyst, did a good job of summarizing some of those in his latest update, which I am going to read right here. So I'm going to put my glasses on because I'm 45 years old and I need glasses to read these days. All right, so he says 2025 just wasn't Bitcoin's year. It wasn't the once in a generation AI tech trade. So he, acknowledges, like everybody, that a ton of people, the AI revolution pulled a bunch of money away from other good investments, including a bunch of money away from Bitcoin. So 2025 just wasn't Bitcoin's year. It wasn't the once in a generation AI tech trade. The Federal Reserve has had much tighter monetary policy than many anticipated. Now that will change. The Trump administration's getting their own chair of the Federal Reserve starting in May of this coming year. They're going to drop interest rates. They're going to print a ton of money. But the quantitative easing, meaning the how easy credit is and how much money the government is printing and how bad inflation is, was not nearly as bad as people predicted, and therefore a lot fewer people were looking for an inflation hedge. Now, all of that inflation is coming. If you think it's not coming, clip this video. There's going to be huge inflation coming in the next number of years because the Federal Reserve is massively cranking up by necessity the amount of money they're printing, because otherwise the whole system's going to crash. But anyway, it was not, as James Check says, we're not in an outright stimulative regime of QE where the government is just literally dropping money out of helicopters. Also, Bitcoin isn't the OG global reserve asset that gold is. So when all of the central banks decided at the same time that they should diversify out of US dollars, we were still closer to the old regime of gold than we were to the new regime of Bitcoin. So central banks, other than some pilot programs here and there where they're buying $1 million or $10 million or relatively small amounts, central banks are massively hoarding gold right now. Because again, central banks are scared of losing control, which they do with Bitcoin, and their sort of safety blanket that they've known for hundreds of years is gold. And so they're buying up gold. Now, Bitcoin will make gold obsolete, but it will take time. And in the meantime, here we are. James Check says we've seen tons of spot selling above $95,000, which is only easing off just now. Again, back to we talked a lot about the fact that a lot of Bitcoin OGs, $100,000 was their number. So once Bitcoin got close to $100,000 in late 2024 and ultimately passed and stayed in the ballpark of $100,000, a lot of people that have held Bitcoin for a very long time decided it was time to upgrade their lifestyle in whatever way. Buying houses, buying cars, funding college funds, whatever it is people do who have a ton of Bitcoin, and it's their only asset, and they decide to diversify by buying a bunch of other things to make their lives better in the real world, which they have absolutely every right to do, and which one day you will do with your Bitcoin. The Bitcoin you bought at $126,000, when Bitcoin is 1.26 million and you are up 10x on your investment, you will also be buying the nice things that other people are buying right now. And it's only a matter of time. But that selling pressure, just like it took a long time to get through $10,000 per Bitcoin. I mean, it just took the Bitcoin price hung out a long time above and below $10,000 before it finally cleared that. And all the OGs were done that had been waiting for the magic $10,000, which again did not mean they sold right at $10,000. It just means once Bitcoin was in the ballpark of $10,000, they put the wheels in motion to do things that otherwise they didn't feel like they could afford. Some of those things took months to put into place. Some of them took half a year to put into place. But eventually they got all those things put into places. They liquidated whatever Bitcoin they wanted to liquidate. And the resulting effect is here we are. A lot of selling pressure around $100,000. Also, James Check says price has effectively chopped solidated sideways in a big range over the entire year as a result of everything I just said. He says it appears to me as though we are getting closer and closer to another one of those liquidity cracks like we saw in September of 2019, which forced central banks to backpedal on the restrictive monetary policy and return to balance sheet expansion. I would agree with him. The cracks in the financial system are showing, and at some point they're going to bring out the money bazooka, meaning they're going to print a ton of money, which is going to result in a ton of inflation, which is going to make asset prices like Bitcoin go way up. And the question is, how much Bitcoin are you going to own when that happens? James Check says they don't return to balance sheet expansion because they want to, but because they need to keep the wheels on the fiat cart. So again, we don't invest in Bitcoin because we think one day governments are going to like it. We invest in Bitcoin because the financial system requires them to print a ton of money to keep the party going. So free money from the government is like, the punch bowl filled with alcohol at a party. No matter how drunk everybody is, as long as you keep the party going with more alcohol, you can keep people from getting a hangover. Now, eventually it stops working because you get liver failure and you get alcohol poisoning and all that. But on a temporary basis, you can stave off calamity in a fiat-based financial system by printing more money. And they are about to do that in spades, but it obviously took longer than me and others predicted. And then James Check says, whilst 2025 may not have been Bitcoin's year, the very reason I personally accumulate it as insurance against the inevitable debasement of fiat currency are becoming more likely to my eye, not less. So I would agree with that 100%. All of the reasons I own Bitcoin are more present now than they've ever been. Does that, or is that reflected in the Bitcoin price today? No. I wish the price was a lot higher. But you have a second chance. Because all of the people who wish they had accumulated Bitcoin at $86,000 and were disappointed because they couldn't buy $86,000 Bitcoin back when it was 110, 112, 118, guess what? You can buy it for $86,000 right now. Now, will you? My guess is if this is your second bear market, meaning if you live through the 2022 bear market, but you are not accumulating Bitcoin, my guess is you are accumulating Bitcoin right now. Because once you go through one bear market and you realize Bitcoin always comes back stronger and faster, then you tend to accumulate on your second bear market. So if you live through the 2022 bear market, my guess is you are buying Bitcoin like a madman right now in the end of 2025. If this is your first bear market, meaning the very first Bitcoin you ever bought was at a price higher than today, then you're probably not accumulating Bitcoin right now. Now, you should be buying Bitcoin right now, but you probably feel like most people who buy Bitcoin right before their first bear market, which is they feel like they were late to the party. Maybe they bought Bitcoin right at the end. Maybe the party's over. Maybe Bitcoin is just going to slowly grind down from here into irrelevance. I can absolutely assure you none of that is true. Bitcoin is stronger than it has ever been. You are not late to the party. The party is just getting started. And one day in the relatively near future, you will look back and you will wish you had bought way more Bitcoin than you have right now. But again, that's a day in the future. And it's very hard to convince you of that if this is your first Bitcoin price dip. If it's your first price dip, I get it. It feels scary. It feels like you're at the end of the party. You're wondering if you did the right thing when you bought Bitcoin in the first place. Again, I can promise you, you're in a great spot. Nothing's wrong with Bitcoin. It's only a matter of time until we set new all-time highs. That is life in the land of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is completely fine. And if I were you, I would buy more Bitcoin, and I would buy more Bitcoin right now. That does not mean it can't dip farther, but Bitcoin is on sale. Nobody knows how much farther it might dip. That's unknowable. But right now it's on sale. Right now it's a great price. And if I get US dollars from any source that show up, tax returns, I don't care. If US dollars shows up in my possession, I will buy Bitcoin with it immediately at today's price, regardless of what today's price is. I am not waiting for dips. I'm not playing stupid games. I'm not selling Bitcoin with the intent of buying it back lower. Do not do that. You will get burned. That is a horrible idea. Bitcoin's on sale. Buy as much as you can. Hold on to it for as long as conceivably possible. The strategy is the same. It doesn't change. And again, on the other side of this price dip, you'll wish you had bought a lot more Bitcoin. It will be literally that simple.